Good afternoon and welcome everyone to this online policy dialogue organized by the European Policy Center to analyze the outcome of the elections, parliamentary elections that took place in Albania on Sunday. This event is part of the Election Monitor, which is a flagship initiative by the EPC to analyze the results of the elections that take place across Europe, both in current member states and in candidate countries, and analyze their implications for the future of the EU. My name is Berta López. I am a policy analyst following the Western Balkans and EU enlargement policy. And today it is my pleasure to moderate this event and to be joined by three great experts that will help us understand the meaning and the implications of the results of Sunday's elections. With me today, there is first Daniel Prroni. He's a researcher at the Institute for Democracy and Mediation. Gjergji Vurmo, member of BiEPAG and founder of Elevate Consulting, and Tefta Kelmendi, who is Deputy Program Director for Wider Europe at the European Council on Foreign Relations. As always, I will start with an exchange with the panelists, and then I will give the floor to our audience for questions and answers. I encourage all of you to participate, to actively participate in the discussions and to put your questions either in written form through the Q&A box that you will find in your screens, or if you want to put your questions directly to our speakers, you can also raise your digital hand, and I will give you the time when give you the floor when the time comes. Having said that, let's kick it off with an analysis of the election, of the results. With 90% of the vote counted, the results show a clear, I would say, a clear victory for the incumbent Socialist Party led by Edi Rama, who is heading towards his fourth mandate, something that is unprecedented in the country. And the main opposition party, the Democratic Party, got 34% of the vote, even running with a huge coalition with a number of other minor opposition parties. I will start by giving the floor to Daniel for your analysis. How do you read these results? Were these results expected? How do you see that?
Yeah, thank you, Berta. As we said, we headed into elections on Sunday, and up to now, there's more than 95% of the votes counted. However, the picture of the results was clear in the few hours after the the counting process started. Depending on who you ask, maybe even before the elections themselves, the picture was clear. But we see now that the Socialist Party, who has finished its third term, won by more than 50% and is heading to a fourth mandate with an even stronger grip on the power in Albania. It is on course to win 8 more seats in the parliament, amounting to 82 in a parliament of 140 seats, and came close to securing a qualified majority. Whereas the main opposition party, the Democratic Party, which, as you said, ran in a coalition with numerous other small parties, has accumulated so far 52% of the votes, which translate into 52 seats actually in the parliament, which is a sharp decline from its 2021 results. So in that sense, they are both sort of in a symmetry to each other. The Socialist Party has gained 8 mandates, and the Democratic Party has lost 7 mandates so far. Voter turnout, though, was significantly lower than 4 years ago, and we see that there's a 42% turnout, but the number is yet to be confirmed by the Central Election Commission. This might be a factor. This might be produced by the fact that there's been immigration in the last few years in Albania, and the low trust from citizens in the electoral process and democratic processes in general. So this is the first view that we have of the election results. As I said, no surprises other than the extent to which the Socialist Party gained more seats than it had, and the Democratic Party lost more seats than they had. The other minor story is that two new parties seem poised to win a seat in the parliament. These are parties that have not held power before, been part of the institutions before, and are not spin-offs of the two main political parties. This is a very thin silver lining, so thin that most people might even miss it, though. But we hope that, there's a hope that at least they might bring some new approach towards parliamentary life, which has been suffering in the last 4 years with heavy polarization between the two main parliamentary groups, with very low functioning of the institution, low oversight of the parliament towards the government. We see that there has been parliamentary commissions that have been refused to be established by the government, and changes to the laws which have become unilateral. So at least we hope that some new faces can bring fresher approaches to this.
Thank you, Daniel. I would ask Gjergji, I don't know if you share this reading, this analysis of the results, and I would add the question: why do you think that the Socialist Party has managed, or Rama has managed to consolidate this victory? Does it mean that like there is a general endorsement of Rama's work in leading the country, or how do these results how are these results explained? And also, I would like to add to the discussion, what do you think has been the role of the vote of the diaspora? Because for those who are unaware, that these were the first elections where Albanians living abroad could vote. So I'm wondering to which extent these extra voters have managed to shift the results.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Berta. Well, these are all very good questions. But the results so far show that while this is a historic fourth mandate of Rama and the Socialist Party, the chunk of votes that they have traditionally had in the past 1 or 2 elections has not changed much. We'll have to wait until the end of the results, but it seems so. The main change is the plus-minus change of numbers in the number of MPs on one side or the others is mainly due to 2 factors. First, the terrible performance of the opposition. Secondly, it is owed also to the unfairness of the election formula. Let me give you just one example. At the national level, one party that won 3 MP seats so far, the Social Democrat Party, has fewer votes than another party, a newcomer, that has slightly more number of votes at the national level. And this latter party has won only one parliamentary seat. Let's get back to the elections. These felt like maybe routine elections. I mean, you could feel that it was not that important to the EU either, while in the country, most of the people knew or felt the coming results. So from this perspective, I think these were not elections to see who will get the prime minister's vote, but rather these were elections to elect the opposition. The only interesting element in these elections, I think, was how the opposition would look like in the next 4 years. I don't think many people doubted that Rama was heading towards a 4th mandate, and maybe This is owed in part to his performance, but mostly, as I said, it is owed to the inability of the opposition to rethink itself, to reconsider itself from electoral point of view of the machinery, but especially from the point of view of what it should look like and whether it has the ability to raise the hopes and encourage citizens to go out and vote. Obviously, in all these, the opposition failed. It failed because probably it got back to an opposition leader that most of the Albanians felt that should have left the scene many years ago. Secondly, it was interesting. Last night I was following one TV debate, and there was one of the ministers heading one of the most important counties, regions in Albania, saying that at the moment that we saw the list of the opposition of DP's candidates, we knew that we were going to get extra mandates. And this is true. If you look at the opposition's DP party's candidate list, it was not a winning candidate list. It was a list that is compiled from people that are very close to the opposition leader. And in Albanian, we say it's a list for bad days rather than good days. Diaspora vote. Personally, I'm a little bit disappointed. I must say that my hopes were not so high, but I was still hoping that the diaspora could change or could instill some hope. The fact is that the diaspora's vote mirrors or reflects more or less the percentages at the national level. With still some minor changes. However, the diaspora vote is still in the early counting. The vast majority of the vote has not been counted yet. What's coming next, and I'll close here, is again the opposition. How the opposition will look like. What will the opposition do in Albania in order to make best use of these coming 4 years in order for it and for the country to show up in the next round of elections with more citizens trusting the system, with more citizens showing up in the votes, and obviously with a much more solid political offer than the one that we saw. It will probably be a very difficult process from the DP party. We still don't have a reaction from Sali Berisha, who is the head of the DP party. But personally, I'm not very hopeful that Berisha or the DP members will have the wisdom to make sure that their party serves the citizens of Albania rather than the needs and the urges of their leader.
Thank you. And I saw, Daniel, that you raised your hand, and I don't know if Tefta, you also want to come in. I would, like, speaking about the opposition, to which extent do you think that these new parties that are not part of the coalition also can play a role or help change these dynamics? Daniel, over to you, and then Tefta, if you want to come in.
Yeah, well, I agree with the picture laid down by Gjergji and the fact that while it was expected that the Socialist Party would win rationally, but it is hard to explain it, and I'll try to explain it, but I even haven't convinced myself when hearing my own arguments, but on this. And first, I agree that the law is flawed, the electoral law, which has throughout the years been changed to the will of the two main political parties who look after their interest, and we have ended up with this electoral code. The second is that the ruling party, so the Socialist Party, has instrumentalized its power in a much more sophisticated and efficient manner than its predecessor did. Although they work on the same model, it seems that the Socialist Party has found, as I said, a more efficient manner. They heavily pressurize, put pressure on the public administration with fear of people losing their jobs, and find pressure points in other people as well, whether it be pensions, property rights, economic interests. So basically, Edi Rama has captured and has personalized the state to work to its benefit. And the third, as I said, is the migration, particularly among the youth and qualified professionals, which remains a critical challenge and has drained the resistance and the potential for any opposition party to run into the elections. And as I said, all this will mean that the Socialist Party will govern unbothered for the next 4 years, whereas the Democratic Party, again, as also Gjergji said, it was unable to renew itself. It was unable to inspire even among themselves, let alone others. And they ran on a campaign which was a mix of highly unrealistic promises, a wish list that people could see through, and an attempt to portray themselves as close to the Trump movement, which again, people saw through because you cannot just import global narratives into a local context and expect for them to have any effect on this. And all this made it clear that the Democratic Party was not seeking to win elections, but to hold on to whatever power they were left with. And on the newcomers in the parliament, well, their influence will be marginal in the next 4 years, for sure, considering their weight in these elections. But as I said, the new thing might be that they might improve the parliamentary life. They might make use of some oversight instruments better than they've been used up to this point by the Democratic Party, or to at least try to see how holding the government accountable could look like, even on a smaller scale.
Thank you. And Tefta, I don't know if you want to come in.
Yes, very briefly, to just add to what was already said on the election by Daniel and Gjergji, I share, of course, the assessment that this result was more or less expected. And on that, I would add that it's important to also have in mind that a lot of it was a result of how weak the opposition remains in Albania. And it's important to also know that Albania is dominated by these two political parties in its post-socialist historical political context, and that the system doesn't allow for emerging of new political parties in a way that they can have substantial power to bring about change. And this has affected a lot Albania's democracy in many ways. And of course, we can see how it is beneficial for Albania's overall EU integration process to continue in this path, which for a large part can be attributed to a socialist party's governance for all its successes that we need to acknowledge. The Socialist Party has contributed to a modernization of Albania. It has contributed to the overall efforts that are that are very much supported by the US and the EU on justice and rule of law reform and economic development, rise of investments, modernization of infrastructure. All of this has happened indeed during these decades of socialist party ruling. But in terms of what it means for the democracy, obviously it doesn't show that the health of Albania's democracy is to the level that there is no real political plurality in the country. And this is also a result of the Democratic Party's leadership, the Democratic Party's own polarization and the issues, and the fact that maybe, like Gjergji mentioned, the system, the electoral system itself doesn't allow for the small parties to actually have equal representation or in parliament. And this is something that can be addressed, of course, through electoral reform as well. this is what I wanted to come in more generally on these election results, and please feel free to ask any questions.
Yeah, I will follow up now. You were mentioning the EU dimension of the elections and of Rama's mandate. I see that we have a question already in the Q&A, but since it's related to like geopolitics and global affairs, I will leave it for later. I will now first follow up with a question on what has been, so how present is the EU path in the electoral campaign in Albania? We saw Rama with a t-shirt with a 5, referring to like 5 years to 2030, which is the alleged goal to join the EU that he has advocated for, and that the Commission somehow has endorsed. During the hearings, Marta Kos said that it was, I don't know exactly like with which words, but like that it was realistic and that the Commission wouldn't help the country advance. Albania has indeed in the past years advanced a lot in the EU path after a few years of stagnation. And last October, Albania officially or in practice opened accession talks with the EU with the opening of the fundamentals cluster. Being Albania, the country in the Western Balkans where like the highest support for the EU project exists, what has been the role of the EU in the campaign, and how is this promising EU path seen from Albania?
Of course, the EU has featured in Edi Rama's campaign prominently. He can also, I mean, it is in his advantage. It was in the advantage of his campaign to feature it also because of the progress that has been achieved throughout these years, because of the support he personally and his country has gotten in the past years by the EU, including member states on Albania's EU integration process. And yes, he has made a promise that he is ready with his government to advance Albania's integration and make it a success by 2027. This promise does speak to Albanian voters. As I said earlier, Albanians are interested to see the country overcome corruption, overcome unemployment, and integrate to the EU as soon as possible. They are aware of the geopolitical context and the challenges that this may entail. So they also are acknowledging that there is a real momentum and that Albania is grasping this momentum. At least it's the front runner among the Western Balkans countries to have done so since 2022. And as you mentioned, there are actual concrete progress in that regard. Albania also has administrative capacities that it has in place, and it's advancing the technical process. It has opened 3 clusters, fundamentals, but also internal market and external relations. Negotiations are ongoing, and in the pace in which they are advancing, we can hope, of course, that by 2030, Albania might be quite advanced. But as we know, the enlargement process is very much a process that is decided by member states, in a sense that at one point the process can be blocked by any member state, and we cannot foresee how it will evolve between now and 2027 or 2030. But so far, in the current context, given that both Albania, the Socialist Party, is determined to support the process, and the EU as well is supporting Albania, there is this continuous momentum in favor of Albania's accession, and we'll see how it evolves and how the context also supports this or not. But what Albania needs to address to allow for this process to continue is, of course, despite supporting overall reforms, it needs to ensure that this rule of law enforcement institutions, and here I refer specifically to SPAC, to Special Anti-Corruption Agency, needs to remain independent, needs to be able to continue working without pressure. And unfortunately, during the campaign, and especially with the indictment of the very high-level officials, we have seen increased pressure on this institute. So this will also exposes a bit the vulnerability of this institution in Albania from pressures coming from different people or organizations. And to be able to ensure this independence, there needs to be a total hands-off approach from the government, political elites, oligarchic elites, economic elites, and whatnot. And another element to it is, of course, EU and US presence and support for these institutions, which in current context, US's maybe uncertain position in the Western Balkans more generally and specifically on Albania raises a bit of questions on how much this institution can be able to have this international support that it needs. But EU is there and needs to ensure that this institution remains independent and continues doing its work. Because for Albania to continue advancing, it needs to still address corruption. It's still only the initial stage of, I mean, I wouldn't say initial, but there is still a lot to be done in that regard. And the second challenge that it needs to address is issues related to more broadly freedom of expression and media. There is also an issue here because there's been instances of attacking of journalists. Media is instrumentalized by political elites and various elites in the country. There is no transparency of media financing. This needs to also be addressed. This is something that is going to come up at one point in the, and it's already probably coming up in the integration process. And the third and my last point would be that, yes, how stable this government will be in terms of political stability, addressing the issue of polarization in parliament, working constructively in this joint EU integration agenda, will also determine the pace of Albania's overall integration process. And maybe I will stop here and just take questions.
Thank you. I would move to like either Gjergji or Daniel, if you want to take the floor on this same topic of EU integration. Okay, I see Gjergji that you unmuted yourself. How do you assess this this time frame of 2027, 2030? Do you think it's realistic? Do you think there's real political will? And also, I have the feeling also, like looking at the numbers of the Eurobarometer, that maybe in Albania there's less Euroscepticism than in other neighboring countries such as North Macedonia, probably for obvious reasons. How do you see that?
Yes, that is the case, and that will probably stay the case until the end. I mean, hopefully that ends, and implying the accession of the country, hopefully that is not too far. Look, I mentioned at the beginning that this felt like routine elections, and that in that routine, you didn't really feel Brussels' presence or the EU following closely these elections. And in a way, that gives the impression that this is not the best time to talk about democracy in Brussels. And that feeling sort of translated also in the Albanian electoral campaign. I mean, we heard all kinds of promises, but we didn't really hear a solid discourse which would have to be, you know, pushed forward by the opposition on democracy and rule of law. On one hand, that is to a certain extent understandable. I mean, all Europe is undergoing a very important geopolitical momentum, and it would be a pity if the country does not make use of it. It's one of those very rare moments that does not come so often. And it is important for Albania not to miss another train like the one that we missed during the 90s. From this perspective, one can explain, although the extent to which one can agree or disagree, that's completely different thing. There are many people in Albania who believe that accession is very important, but so is the quality of democracy and sustainability of the institutions and how they are upholding democratic values and so on and so forth. You mentioned the political stability in the country. I think in the next 4 years, maybe Albania will be a little bit even too stable from the governmental point of view. This comes not only from the numbers of the political majority, but unfortunately comes also from a sort of pessimism that I see, or lack of really hope in the opposition's ability to rethink itself, to reinvent itself, to come to a new political alternative that would encourage hope and trust and participation from the citizens. On the other hand, the majority, the current majority, the new majority of the Socialist Party, I see it as even as threatening to some of the elements or to some of the achievements that the country has made over the past few years. And most notably, I refer here to the independence of SPAC. I mean, I fully agree with Tefta on this point that it would be an extremely bad move if the independence of SPAC is undermined, if their ability to act not only against organized crime, but also against high-level corruption would be undermined. And SPAC, from this perspective, has done really an excellent job. It has transformed itself into dare I say, even a historic institution in Albania. No other institution in Albania has been ever trusted so much as Albanians trust SPAC. Even in these elections, SPAC's role was praised by many observers as having an extremely positive impact on the way elections were conducted, in the sense that some of those irregularities that we're used to see in different election cycles in Albania, especially in the last ones, in the 2021st, were sort of prevented by the very active role of SPAC, acting in cooperation with the prosecutors of the general prosecution at local level. Last point, the future. It will be extremely important how the EU would assume its role in relation to Albania and in relation to the region. One of the advantages of Albania is not maybe that Albania is an excellent student in democracy-related issues, but rather it comes from the fact that Albania, unlike the other Western Balkan countries, including the frontrunners, does not really have that type of problems or challenges that they pose, be it in terms of bilateral disputes, be it in terms of presence or influence from Eastern powers, most notably Russian, but even Chinese presence. Albania is not the one that is causing troubles in the neighborhood. It usually causes troubles at its own backyard, but not more than that. So the next 5 years will the developments of Albania will have the potential, or will be should be under the close eye of the EU. US presence and US lack of attention in the region or Albania, I really, with that administration in the US, I really don't know if it's a good thing or if it's a bad thing that US presence will not be felt. But in any case, considering Albanians in general, not only Albanians in Albania, but also the Albanian factor in the region, closeness and support for the US role in the region, I think that this may well be challenging times for the Albanian factor in the region, in some of the neighboring countries. I'm sure that Rama has already mastered the art of dealing with all kinds of leaders, and he's likely going to find the common language even with the new administration. But that's not necessarily good news for the Albanians.
Thank you, Gjergji. I don't know if you, Daniel, want to come in on this topic as well.
Yeah, just to add a few words. Yeah, so the Socialist Party did place EU integration in the heart of its campaign this time, which is a bit weird because as professionals who are engaged in the EU integration process, we know that it is a very isolated process which has been very badly communicated by the government throughout these years. And all of a sudden now it wants to convey to the citizens what lies ahead in terms of EU integration. We see that citizens, business associations, NGOs, think tanks, activists, and other actors are very much not part of the technical and the political process of EU integration. And this has led that while the Albanian citizens are very supportive, they are generally uninterested in what goes on with the EU accession process. On the other hand, I think that the EU will be pleased with the fact that the results are straightforward, the government formation will be without trouble, and that work will continue smoothly in the next few years. For example, we have the European Political Community Summit, which will be held in Tirana in the next few days. And it will be the next opportunity for Rama to do what he likes to do best, so play the joyful host in front of everyone. But despite the fact that the elections and for a government formation will go smoothly, the EU will have to be clear in Albania and elsewhere in the region, also as Gjergji mentioned, on the shortcomings, especially on the rule of law, and acknowledge what lies behind the facade in Albania and elsewhere. And what lies behind the facade in Albania is massive corruption, attacks on the media, attacks on the judiciary, an inefficient and ineffective public administration, and organized crime, and a handful of cronies dictating the decisions.
Thank you. Go ahead, Gjergji.
Just wanted to add briefly one thing, because I mean, I fully agree with Daniel's point. I just fear that usually the opposition's rejection to, conduct a comprehensive analysis of why certain things have happened during elections, they usually find the justification in the exact reasons Daniel mentioned, in the irregularities of the process, of the election process, the role of, I don't know, the organized crime, and so on and so forth. While I think that these may be valid reasons to, to be considered while assessing the elections in Albania, maybe to a lower degree in these elections as compared to the last one, but still, let's just wait for the local observers report. I think that this should not be used as an excuse by the opposition to to bury its head in the sand and not look and not speak truthfully to their voters, to their members, to itself at the end of the day. I mean, look, so sometimes this looks like those experiences of the childhood. Every one of us has been sent by our mothers to buy something in the store, and we didn't buy that thing, but we bought something else, and lied to our mothers that our money was stolen, and so on and so forth. If you live in a bad neighborhood, the mother will understand you, but if you live in a good neighborhood, it's obviously something has to do with you. I'm not saying that Albania is the best EU neighborhood, absolutely, but Albania is not Belarus, Belarusia either. So the opposition needs to really face itself, its members, its philosophy, and the reality of these elections. These elections were not won in these numbers by Rama because they were stolen, but because the opposition failed to inspire.
Really comprehensive way of summing it up. I saw, Tefta, that you raised your hand. Go ahead.
Just a very two fingers on the last point of Gjergji's. I mean, the issue of corruption and organized crime is definitely persists and needs to be addressed. But if you think of it, just that this opposition in Albania, the opposition leader is being investigated for a serious involvement in criminal activity. I mean, for high-level corruption, and is under U.S. sanctions for corruption. What message does that send to people who want a change in Albania in terms of putting an end to corruption and organized crime, and focusing on really making Albania a true democracy? This is why I think that the issue is also very much one of the opposition party, the main opposition force in Albania, and the overall problem of smaller opposition parties who are anti-establishment and maybe who have potential on addressing some of these key questions and becoming a true political force one day. This is just to add on that point.
Thank you. And in your interventions, like you all mentioned a little bit, like the role of Albania at the regional level in the Western Balkans, and also like globally, I would take the opportunity now to delve into these issues. On one hand, now with the consolidation of like Rama has emerged, I would say in the past years as one of the strongmen in the region, trying to play this role as a mediator who has no conflicts or issues with any of the neighbors, and quite the opposite, trying to mediate, to play this brokering role. At the global level, also, like there have been like some summits, Western Balkan summits hosted in Albania, and as you said, there will be the European Political Community later this week being hosted in Albania. How do you see the role of Rama as a regional leader? How do you think that he will play this role? And also at the global level, I'm going to bring in the question by Boyken Sinai that he put at the beginning of the conversation, which basically is asking, how do you explain Prime Minister Rama's apparent double standards when it comes to international conflicts like Ukraine and Palestine? From one side, presenting himself as a strong international player, on the other one, signing arms deal with Israeli companies, and visiting Israel, and he's asking why this is not being questioned in Albania's political or media landscape. Which role do you think that Rama will play globally as a global player? And I don't know if someone wants to take it first. Look around. Maybe, okay, Tefta, go ahead.
I can start very briefly. First, on the regional dimension, indeed, I mean, first of all, we need to look at it pragmatically. And in that sense, indeed, Edi Rama has been a pragmatic and constructive leader in the region for a large part. He has also been clumsy in certain situations in dealing with some of the ongoing disputes between neighbors. And here I refer to the dispute, I mean, to the actual bilateral issue between Kosovo and Serbia, where Edi Rama at certain points wanted to come in to bring about solutions, and they usually backfired, and had contributed also to some, for the first time, to a relationship between Kosovo and Albania that is not to the level that it was in the past. So between the leaders, I believe, I refer here, and not, of course, it's just at the leaders level at this stage. In other words, Albania, and in here I refer to Edi Rama's, he has always tried to be constructive in a sense of in favor of regional cooperation, in favor of connectivity and broader support for broader regional activities, as long as they contribute to bringing the region closer to the EU. He has also he has indeed a big diplomatic outreach in the EU and abroad, and he uses that in favor of the overall regional aspirations for. I mean, he advocates for the region's integration into the EU. He has supported Kosovo as well and its integration in international organizations and its further international recognition. So yes, he has been playing an overall constructive role, I would say. He has been criticized as well certain times for his certain relationships, and here I refer to his approach vis-a-vis Vučić at a specific situation, but also his relationship to also Viktor Orban, also his relationship to Prime Minister of Turkey, Erdogan. And in that sense, yes, he positions himself as a leader that can talk to all leaders, that he's pragmatic, that he's pursuing Albania needs to pursue a multi-vector foreign policy because of being a small country, and linking this to the issue of how he approaches international conflicts. I mean, and here is not only Albania's case, but I believe it's other countries in the region. There are small countries that are highly dependent on key allies, and here especially Western allies for support of key processes, and European integration is one of them. I don't think Albania can afford to take strong positions on some of these conflicts that are actually polarizing and problematic for some of its key allies, and I don't need to mention names here. But I also don't think that it says anything substantial about what the actual position of Albania is on these conflicts.
Maybe Daniel, if you want to come in.
Yeah, just to add a few stuff. Yeah, I agree that Rama has tried to remain pragmatic and constructive in its relations in the region and abroad. It seems that his motto is always to build alliances rather than create tensions. But that the thing that we fail to scrutinize sometimes is under what conditions these alliances are built. And we see that even with certain players that were mentioned, but also, for example, with the US right now. At first, he was critical towards Trump. Now he gifted an island to his family. On the other hand, again, the relations with Italy, where we signed a memorandum on migration, on containing migration, which again, the conditions of that alliance that was built for a higher cause is something that is mostly rejected by Albanians, and either in terms of support of being supporters of the protection of human rights, but also in terms of maintaining our dignity in the international sphere. So in this sense, Rama it seems that he's willing to consider whatever brings international points for him. And that happens also with international conflicts. It seems that follows the line of what the most profitable way would be for him. If the other way was around, if the conflict in Gaza would have international support and attention, he probably would have held a summit in Tirana for that. But so there's his approach is not principled in this.
Very interesting points raised. I don't know if Gjergji, you want to come in as well on the topic of regional and global role.
No, look, Rama is as colleague said, is a pragmatic person, and he's the type of leader that likes to draw attention, upon himself mostly. But truth be told, I mean, over the years, he's succeeded also to draw attention also on the country. There have been, Albania has entered certain reports, not for a good image, of course, and Rama has tried to his best to counter that. in my opinion, in the wrong way. I mean, if you want to counter the image that is portrayed in the country in certain reports, you need to work at home rather than working at the regional or international sphere to play with the image of the country. However, image is something that he does best, and sometimes, truth be told, he's managed to be successful in that. He's also had failures, as Tefta said, for instance, at the regional level. Another failure was the Open Balkan Initiative. The moment when he launched it, it was a very good moment for him, in his opinion, to score points with, playing with this card of, Albania does not have any prejudices, so we can be very close friends with Vučić and Serbia and so on and so forth. And in the eyes and the ears of internationals that, do not have necessarily the information or the attention span to hear you for more than 5 seconds, that scores point, of course. But other than that, what is Rama's most important event that he even tried successfully to capitalize in these elections is Albania's accelerated or in a way push from the EU to move forward much faster with the EU accession process, and he capitalized on that during these elections. Yeah, on the other events, I think we need to bear in mind that Albania is too small country and does not have the luxury to enter or comment on certain international events, regardless of how we or the majority of people feel about that.
Thank you. And we have one last question, which goes back a little bit to the start of the conversation of like Edi Rama's new government. And it says that it's by Blerian Avino, that says, with a super majority of Edi Rama and immense power he holds now, what role is left for CSOs and public watchdogs? What should we do to contribute to democratic resilience considering these conditions? Are we also failing to mobilize and motivate and present a vision for the country? Many things. I think that to some extent, you have answered already like some part of the questions, but if you would like to add something on that, I would now give you the floor. And I would also take the opportunity to give you the floor for some final remarks if there's something you haven't mentioned. So we can, I see that Gjergji is unmuted, so I would give the floor to Gjergji for answering the question and also final remarks. Then we can go to Tefta and then Daniel, and then we will close it here if it's okay for you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Bleriana. Very good question, very relevant, very challenging for now and for the next 5 years, definitely. Sometimes in the past month or so, I try to speak as someone that has no conflict of interest, but once you're a civil society member, you still keep that feeling or membership inside you for much longer, regardless of the fact that I don't work for a think tank anymore. I think the civil society in Albania has an immense challenge ahead, facing not only a supermajority, a majority like the last time this kind of majority, I think it was maybe back in 1997 with the collapse of the state, and even the opposition had the exact same failure as in 1997. So the civil society has a very important role to play in order to mitigate some of the developments that might be coming, and developments which for sure I anticipate that the opposition will not be able to speak to the Albanians with that trustworthy voice as some civil society actors can do. However, the civil society in Albania faces its own challenges and concerns, and there are many of them. But I think in order for the civil society to best serve this need that I mentioned, to speak to people and to citizens with that trustworthy voice, is instead of mitigating some reports, I think it's better for the civil society to find the roots in the communities of citizens, in the communities of different interest groups, to reinvent itself. The next 5 years will be a period for the civil society too, to reconsider in some parts the business model, but to reconsider also much of its arsenal of actions and instruments while doing their work. I'll stop here.
Very shortly, and it's also good to end on the civil society note. In Albania, I totally agree that regardless of the fact that this election result was expected, as I said, and as others said, it shows that this is also allowing the Socialist Party to really sustain power, and it's not very good for the democracy in many levels. If there is no change of government from time to time. So yes, civil society here has an important role, but again, here again, the EU needs also to be aware of that and help the civil society assume a greater role in playing as watchdogs, but not only, also in developing some solutions in some of the ongoing issues and challenges, not just related to rule of law, but as I said, media freedom, transparency of media financing, freedom of expression, and also having the civil society engaged more in the process of European integration, as Daniel said. They need to be part of this. It's actually a requirement of the process itself that they are part of this overall effort of the country, because it's not a process that it's only led by the government. It needs to involve the civil society as well. But given the challenges that they might be facing in Albania, like they're facing everywhere due to the reduced funding from the US and US aid closing down, the EU really needs to step in and needs to do this quickly, not just in Albania, obviously, but Albania, given how vulnerable remains, it's important that the EU steps in support of civil society initiatives in that regard.
Yeah, just to add a few more things. Thank you, Diana, for the question. Well, first, we're on trenches together, so we have to brace together, first of all. And we know that power, especially in Albania, especially with this government and previous governments, power translates into arrogance. And that is quite a roadblock in our work. We need first to be bold and also Gjergji said, maybe compensate for some of the boldness that might not come from anywhere else. And this is something that we've been failing to do so far. And we would have to really try to cooperate more on the ground and try to talk to people. As you know, that the trust in civil society organizations is very low. And that comes also as a factor of the efforts of the government to delegitimize us in this process. And it was clear also during the campaign, the last few days, if you would see the prime minister in front of journalists, at first, if you saw how he would handle their questions, at first I thought it was just a tactic to gain votes. But now that I see the result, and I'm sure that he knew the result, and considering that he was comfortable, it's arrogance. Then there's no other explanation left. Why would he treat journalists like that? So yeah, there's rough times ahead. We need to rethink our approach, rethink our strategy, be more on the ground with the people, and let's see if we can compensate, as I said, for some of the boldness that might be needed in the next few years.
Thank you so much. On this positive or hopeful note, we will close it here. It's one, so like perfectly on time. I would like to thank the three of you so much for taking the time for for coming today to speak at this event and share your insights. Gjergji, I see that you unmuted yourself. Do you have something very short?
No. It was just a thank you note for
Okay,
inviting
perfect.
us as well.
Perfect. I thought that you were missing something. I was like, okay, one last chance. But no, we are going to close it here. Again, thank you so much. It was a very insightful discussion, and I invite you and all the audience to continue following our work and the work of our speakers on Albania and on the Western Balkans and enlargement in general. Thank you so much, and have a nice rest of the day.
Thank you.
Ciao.